In the dark room, a girl's voice echoed from a small, glowing device. Cheerfully, she introduced herself as Amasaki Nina, a new streamer. She thanked the audience for joining her very first live stream. There were 102 viewers in the chat. The first comment came from Pepper, expressing excitement for her stream. Another comment below praised her cute voice. The last two comments asked what she planned to do in this stream and mentioned that many new VTubers had recently appeared, saturating the market. The boy sat under his blanket in a room lit only by the small screen, tapping on her stream. A new comment appeared from Ao, saying this was the first time he'd seen a stream like this, and he promised to support her from now on. He encouraged Nina to do her best. Nina gasped softly, surprised by a donation from Ao. She asked if he had stumbled upon her livestream by chance among so many others. Happily, she expressed her gratitude and thanked him for finding her. Quietly, he whispered that he liked her. That day, he fell in love with her. At the store, people were talking and asking each other if anyone knew him. He just stood in front of the counter, while another person answered that it was Miyaki, and they heard that he used to be a programmer at a big company. The other person curiously asked why he was working at a convenience store now. The other person replied that Miyaki seemed to have been abandoned by his fiancée, and that shock caused him psychological trauma. They commented that it seems like today's youth cannot work when their hearts are hurt. Miyaki looked at the employee's only sign on the door where the noise was coming from. The other asked where he heard that from. He replied that his niece's boyfriend worked at the same company as Miyaki. The other continued, "This boy is already 27 years old. It's a pity for his parents to still be single and only work part-time at this age." Miyaki quietly recognized them. It was Suzuki and Sato from the early morning religious service. He wondered, couldn't they wait until I got home to talk about me? He lowered his head, silently admitting that everything they said was true. The girl who broke up with him after 4 years of dating had been his senior at the company. It became a rumor, and he always felt as if everyone was mocking him. His mood spiraled, and he left his job on the doctor's recommendation. He could no longer manage daily life, let alone work. He lived surrounded by bags of trash. Until he met her. Suddenly, a loud voice called his name. Miyaki realized it was the store owner, an old lady with a bright smile but no teeth left. She cheerfully said, "Look, isn't this what you've been waiting for?" In her hands was a box with a poster of several girls sporting cat ears on their foreheads. Miyaki asked if he could draw a ticket. The owner, still smiling, told him, "Your shift's almost over. Go ahead and pick one." He drew a ticket with a QR code and instructions attached. His prize was a tan Popo Akari rubber strap. The owner excitedly asked if she was the girl Miyaki liked. He shook his head and said, "No, I don't really know her that well." "The one I like is Amasaki Nina," he added, a VTuber who debuted this year. With her cheerful, natural way of talking, Nina had quickly earned a lot of love, and her popularity kept rising on social media. For Miyaki, it was thanks to her that he had recovered enough to work part-time again. He looked at the keychain in his hand. A chubby, cartoonish version of her stared back at him. In the end, Miyaki kept drawing tickets until Nina appeared on one, even though he had spent all his money for the month. Rent was still due, and he figured he might have to delay paying the water bill. As he walked through the park, he noticed her again. The same girl with long hair was sitting on a bench. He wondered if she was a student and why she wasn't at school during the day. Half joking, he thought, maybe she's run away from home. The girl turned her head toward the spot where he had stood moments ago, but Miyaki had already slipped away. He let out a relieved sigh, thinking he had dodged a close call. If he accidentally made eye contact with a young girl like that, he would surely be seen as a creep. Even though he had no ill intentions, he knew that, in the eyes of others, he'd be judged guilty without having done anything wrong. He recalled the feeling of people looking at him with cruel, mocking smiles. Suddenly, a sweet female voice called out to him from behind. With a weary expression, he turned around, and there it was, the familiar sparkling eyes and a smile with a small fang. The girl held out the Nina keychain in her hand and said, "You dropped this." Miyaki panicked the moment he saw her, thinking this situation couldn't get any worse. With a playful grin, she teased, "Is it wrong that I picked it up? Especially since I'm the one who found it," he stammered, saying it was his and apologized for bothering her. Then, he quickly thanked her and hurried away. The girl watched him run off, looking a bit puzzled. Miyaki wondered if she had noticed him staring at her earlier. If she had, this situation was even worse. When he finally reached his door, he fumbled through his pockets, searching for his keys. Standing in front of the door for a long time, he worriedly thought he had lost his key. Pulling out his phone, he decided to call the property management company. But of course, his phone ran out of battery. The familiar voice rang out from behind again. She asked him if he was in trouble. He turned around and saw her standing outside his apartment wall. She looked at him curiously, and he looked at her with a worried expression. The two sat on chairs on the sidewalk when he called to ask for help about the situation of his apartment. He handed the phone back and thanked her without daring to look her in the eyes. She told him it was nothing and took the phone back. He muttered a small goodbye and started to leave, but she called back, asking if he was planning to leave right away. She pointed out that he still had time before the property management company's people arrived. She asked him to stay and be her conversation partner. He turned around to look at her, but immediately looked away worriedly. Seeing that he still hadn't moved, she told him that he should do so as a thank you for borrowing her phone. Finally, he sat down and said that she had been appearing in the area quite often lately. Taking that opportunity, he asked her if she had run away from home. She replied that he guessed right, that she had argued with her parents. He thought to himself, based on this, it seemed like she didn't realize he was looking at her before, which was a relief. She said that at first she just killed time at internet cafes or karaoke, but at night those places were noisy. Then she turned to him and said instead of discussing it, she called him Oni-san and asked if he liked VTubers. He was confused when she mentioned that the rubber keychain from earlier was part of the number 100 lottery ticket series that had just been released today. She teased him that he looked like the type of person who liked anime and the like. He replied that he actually doesn't watch much anime. She was surprised and asked if that was true. He said he didn't know much about VTubers, except for this girl in the rubber keychain. He said that the girl's name was Nina. He said Nina was special. He went on to say that he dated someone before. He respects her because she is his senior and colleague at the company. I tried to work hard to become someone worthy of her. But in the end, she betrayed him. She had an affair with a superior in the company, and they broke up. The next day when he came to work, rumors of an affair were spreading everywhere, but it was told the other way around. People rumored that it was he who betrayed her and hurt her. He said that although he tried to explain the truth, no one believed him. They all said that his senior was betrayed by him, and they were sure that he was the one who hurt her. Rumors spread that Miyaki had cheated and hurt Senpai. He said that since the breakup, many things in his life have collapsed, including his job, just because she left him. Then he quickly apologized for telling such a dark story, but she said it was okay. His cheeks turned red and he wondered, why does talking to her make him feel so comfortable? He continued to say that at that time, he watched Nina's live stream. Seeing her happy and working hard, even when being criticized by negative comments, motivated him. Thanks to that, he was recently able to start working part-time. Maybe he would feel the same way about other streamers, but since the person who saved him at that time was Nina, so she is special to you. He said that even so, he is still afraid of communicating with others. He describes himself as a moody hikikomori, who often avoids society. He stared at the keychain in his hand with affectionate eyes, and said that he thought it would be great if one day he could smile in front of everyone like Nina is now. He was working a part-time job at a convenience store, but if he could become like that, he felt like he would be able to take on the same job as before and try his best once again. The girl looked at him sadly, but still encouraged him that he could definitely do it. He bowed his head, smiled, and said he really hoped so. He said that a person like him is laughable. He thinks streaming is just entertainment, not worth being saved by it. But she interrupted and said that it was not playing. He looked at her with wonder. She went on to say that she thinks there are many streamers with different perspectives. However, there are also people who are seriously considering streaming as a real job. She said that streamers always think about stream content so they can enjoy it with the audience. They even worry about creating a character image that doesn't overlap with other personas. They do it because of passion, but because they are all serious. She advised him not to say that they were just playing. He was about to say something but was interrupted when a voice rang out that they were from the Mini Home Building Management Company. He quickly bowed his head, thanked her for everything, and hurriedly left. The manager gave him a replacement key and told him to be more careful from now on. He stood in front of the door, thinking about how the girl earlier seemed a bit angry while talking. He unlocked the door, telling himself that he definitely wasn't very good at talking to girls in real life. When the door opened, his messy apartment appeared before his eyes. He was tired and jumped onto the bed, where there was a pillow with Nina's image on it. With Nina, he wouldn't feel like this. He thought that if he were with Nina, he would just watch one stream and leave a comment. Sometimes Nina will reply to one of his comments and that's all. He remembered the text message that they had broken up, and she had expected more from Ao but had been disappointed. He thought that in reality, he wouldn't be hurt by just small things like this. At night, he woke up while hugging Nina's pillow. He thought about sleeping in a strange position and felt uncomfortable. His stomach growled, making him stop for a moment. On the way back with a bag of food in hand, he suddenly thought about the girl from before. It's already this late. He looked towards the familiar park and thought to himself that she was probably no longer there. But then he saw her. He started looking around, not knowing what to do. He remembered that he needed to thank her for helping earlier, but also remembered that she seemed angry at the end of the conversation. He wondered if it might be better not to bother anymore. But then he saw a man approaching her. He worriedly realized that she was not alone, and the man seemed to be scolding her. He thought maybe they were arguing and lowered his head, smiling wryly, deciding that it was best not to interfere. But then the girl turned her head towards him, shouted that he had arrived and she was waiting for him. She waved to him loudly and said he was late. He wondered if she was saying all that to him. Then she turned back to the man behind her, gave him a victory sign, and said that this was her boyfriend, so she was leaving now. But the man refused to let it go, put his hand on her shoulder, and exclaimed that there was no way he was her boyfriend. She got upset and asked him what he was doing, but instead of letting go, he told her not to try to run away, but to come to his place. Miyaki witnessed it all from afar. The girl asked him to let go, but the man told her she had nowhere to go, and he only said that because he wanted her best. She replied that she said she would handle this herself. He turned away, hesitant, thinking that now was the time to act while they were distracted. Miyaki wondered if it was really okay to leave like that when he heard them continuing to argue. He thought bitterly that in the end he was just running away from things he didn't like, as always. She even listened to the words of someone like him and answered like that. He remembered when he told her that he thought it would be great if one day he could happily smile in front of people, like Nina. She told him that he could definitely do it. That stopped him in his tracks. He clenched his fist and said loudly to the man. He thought she seemed to hate what he was doing, but the man stubbornly replied that of course that was not the case. Miyaki says that's clearly happening here. The angry man grabbed Miyaki's collar, asking what he just said. Miyaki raised his hand awkwardly, saying he wasn't the one who said that. The man said he was causing a nuisance and asked what he was trying to achieve here. Miyaki finally blurted out that being beaten by people who looked strong was his hobby. He said he just happened to see the other man while passing by and really wanted to be beaten. He opened his arms while the man stammered and asked what he was talking about. Miyaki told him to hurry up and hit him, begging him to hit him. The man felt strange by this action, shouted at Miyaki to stop and not to come closer. Finally, he threw Miyaki to the ground, shouting at him to stay away. Miyaki cried out in pain and watched the man leave, thinking he had chased him away. He felt like he looked pathetic. The girl worriedly asked him if he was okay, and explained that the other man had started a conversation with her from somewhere. She's sorry for dragging him into this trouble, but Miyaki said that he was the one who should apologize. She looked at him and asked if anything happened before. He said he thought he might have upset her earlier. She said that wasn't the case, but he still insisted that he should apologize. Suddenly, she said that she would stay at his house because she was afraid the other person would come back. That made him stop, stammering that it might be a bit much. The girl smiled apologetically, took out her phone and said that she was just guessing. He wondered if she was kidding him. She said honestly that she was glad he was here at that time. She said she was in trouble and the place was dark. She was happy to see him because she thought no one would find her. She thanked him with a broad smile. His eyes widened, and he told himself that he never imagined this could happen. He wondered why he didn't realize it sooner. That in real life, he will love her too. His face turned red as he whispered that she was Amasaki Nina. She tilted her head in confusion when he said that she was Amasaki Nina. She asked why he thought she was Nina, making him wonder what he was talking about. He thought it was impossible to meet the person behind the character Nina in a place like this. He stammered that it was because of her voice. She touched her chin as he continued speaking, probably because of the way she spoke, and also, she gave off a similar feeling. She closed her eyes, saying seriously that he had found out quite easily. She said she would be more careful from now on. He shouted in his mind that he was right. He wondered if she always admitted things so easily. She went on to say that he was a fan of Nina, so this must have ruined the image he had of her. She apologized for what just happened, while he was still sitting on the floor, asking if she wasn't going to deny it. He thought to himself, shouldn't VTubers be more worried about personal information being leaked online? She said that she wasn't confident enough to hide things skillfully, and she thought being honest was better than telling a bad lie. In return, she asked him not to tell anyone about this. He quickly told her not to worry and that she could rest assured he wouldn't tell anyone. She bent down in front of him, breathing a sigh of relief. She held out her hand and said that what happened today would be a secret just between the two of them. She raised her pinky finger and asked them to promise each other. He wrapped his pinky finger around her finger, thinking that this action was very similar to Nina's. She whispered, "This is a pinky promise." She turned around and said that she could now leave in peace, but he called out, asked her that she had left home, so did she have anywhere to go? She smiled and replied that if she had, she wouldn't be here. She said she would manage on her own. She then asked him to join one of her streams at another time. He thought he had actually met the person behind Nina. When she heard him stutter, she turned and looked at him. Finally, he said that going out at this time could be dangerous because it was late. He suggested that if she didn't mind, she could stay with him tonight. She nodded, and then she realized she was sitting on the floor with a pillow shaped like Nina next to her. She mutters that he really likes Nina. She looked at the paper in her hand. It was the personal contact information that Miyake had given her. He said that this is his name and contact number. Told her to contact him if anything happened. He also said that she can freely use everything in this apartment as she wants. When leaving, she simply left the door unlocked and just left. She asked him if he was going anywhere. He sheepishly scratched his head and said that he didn't think she would be comfortable if he stayed, so he planned to go to the internet cafe. But she told him that this was his house. He didn't need to worry about her. Before leaving, he said it was okay. He would be back before noon. She slept on her body pillow and wondered if Miyake was the correct pronunciation of his name. She smiled, thinking that he was really a good person. Miyake is at the internet and comic shop. He thought he had been too enthusiastic when he invited her to stay at his house, but he wondered if everything was okay. They weren't there together anyway, so it should be okay. He thought he only invited her to stay after finding out she was Nina, and wondered if that would make him look bad. But he thought, since strange guys like that one might be hanging around here, he couldn't leave her alone. He leaned back in his chair, contemplating that it was a rather dire situation, so he had no choice but to let her stay. Still, he thought maybe he'd better not ask if she was Nina or not, but that doesn't change the fact that Nina is very special to him. He closed his eyes, telling himself that it wasn't like he wanted to meet the real person behind Nina. So after she leaves tomorrow, he decided to forget about meeting her. After that, he returned to the hotel at 11:32. He stood in front of the room door, wondering if she was still there. When he turned the doorknob and realized it was locked, he opened the door and saw Nina in the kitchen, her hair tied in 2 ponytails. She welcomed him home with a warm smile. He asked her why she was still here, repeating that he said this was only temporary accommodation for one night. She replied that she thought it wouldn't be right to leave so soon after what he had done for her. She said that even if she went, she would have nowhere to go, but he pointed out that she had stayed longer than originally planned. She interrupted him, putting the plate of food in front of him, and cheerfully suggested that they should eat together. He asked again, "What is this?" Component placement. But this time, he sat on the floor with her. She explained that it was a dish he prepared by frying cup noodles and rice. She changed the subject and asked why there was no dining table in his house. He apologized about that and took a spoonful to try. He wondered if this was the same as soba and rice cooked together. But then his expression softened when he realized the rather surprising taste. She asked if the food was good, and he replied that it was actually quite good. She happily said that she was happy that he liked the food, which reminded him that it had been a long time since he had eaten with anyone. He felt quite happy about that. Furthermore, he wondered how long it had been since someone welcomed him home. She nervously twiddled her fingers in front of his face and said that there was something she wanted to say since they talked earlier, after he got home. She calls him Ao-san and asks if for just a little while he will let her stay. He immediately spit out the food and asked again what she just called him. She says Ao-san is short for Aoba-san and asks if he doesn't like that name. He breathed a sigh of relief, thinking she had discovered his username. She turned around and asked him whose computer it was. He told her it was his computer. She said she had free time in the evening, so she tried editing the previous live stream into short videos. He asked if it was Nina's livestream. She replied that he was right, but admitted that she was not good at using computers, so she failed and couldn't recover. She wondered if she should pause editing the next live stream. He exclaimed when he heard that and asked her to let him take a look. She didn't object and let him type on her laptop. He asked if she had messed up the data here. Her eyes widened when she saw him going through the data accurately. He stroked his long hair and asked, "Is it possible to take a closer look at the data?" She let him continue working, and after a while he said he probably restored the original live stream. She exclaimed that he really did it. It was amazing. She said she wanted to insert a thumbnail here. He replied that he understood. He looked at the screen and asked, "Is this okay?" She asked if he could do that. He replied, "Of course." She mentioned that the sound in the other video was distorted quite badly. He said if she wanted to fix this, she'd better get a better computer. She asked if he couldn't fix it right away. He affirmed that he could and asked her to wait a bit. She looked at him, surprised and wondering, is he really an extremely talented person? She asked him if he had done any work related to this before. He looked at her questioningly and said that video editing was not his expertise, but he had worked as a programmer at his old company. She asked him if he knew much about these things. He replied that he thought he knew a little more than the average person. She told him to wait a moment, then turned around, and in her hand were 3 thick bills of cash. He looked at her warily when she told him to accept the money. She said it was a video editing fee, and she was paying him. She affirmed that she would definitely pay him, then said that she wanted him to do other things. She announced that she wanted to hire him. He told her that she said she wanted to hire him, and if it was about editing, she could have her company or office do it. She muttered that it wasn't impossible, but she explained that things were complicated right now and would be quite difficult. She said asking someone she didn't know well was risky. She says he already knows about her identity and many other things, so she asked him to help her with Nina's live streams. He still looked uneasy, so she said that if he was worried about money, she could pay him in full. She had another favor to ask him. She pushed the money in her hand towards him and asked him to let her stay at his house for a short time. She lowered her head, saying that of course she would pay the rent and living expenses. She pleaded that she was in trouble, and if the situation continued like this, she would no longer be able to continue live streaming. He said he would answer her requests one by one. She immediately cheered up and obediently uttered a yes. He started by saying that first of all, if she was okay with him, he wouldn't mind helping her with the live streams. But he cannot receive this money. He pushed the money towards her and said that this money was probably directly from the income or donations she received from live streaming. He said from the perspective of a fan who regularly donated to Nina's live stream, he thought it wouldn't be right for someone not part of the management team to receive that money. So as a fan of Nina, he will return this money to her. She replied that the money was not from a donation, causing him to look at her questioningly. She explained that it was the salary the company paid her, separate from the money she received from fans. He objected, saying that even if it was a salary, it still wasn't right. But she said it wasn't that she simply wanted to give him money. She sincerely said that she was just asking a streamer to request work and pay her for it, that's all. She explained that this was payment for work related to the live stream. She said that if he didn't do this, she had no one else to turn to. Then he agreed to do it and said that what she said seemed right. Her face lit up when she heard that. He added that there was one last issue: her staying. He bluntly said that it was impossible and that she could not stay. Her face instantly turned into surprise. She grabbed his shoulder, exclaiming, "Why not?" She reminded him that he let her stay last night. He said that as he thought, living together was impossible. She yells that they won't live together, but he explains that for most Japanese, living with the opposite sex has romantic implications. She stopped screaming and said it was really just temporary for a short while. She was lying directly on top of him and pleading. Says, "Consider yourself helping Nina." He echoed that thought, that helping her was like helping Nina. The person Nina saved can now help her in return. He said okay. Then her face lit up again, but he said there was one condition. He mentioned that she had run away from home after an argument with her parents, and he suggested that they work together to resolve that issue. He said if she agreed, he would listen to her story and see how he could help. She looked around nervously, and he reassured her that he wasn't asking her to tell right away. However, he said that if he felt she had no intention of solving this problem, he would ask her to leave. She nodded in agreement and thanked him, said she was really in trouble. She also mentioned that maybe she should go back to school. He agreed, saying it would be better for her to return to school. She added that, speaking of which, She had kept her uniform in her bag the whole time, so it was wrinkled. He turned to her when he heard the word uniform. She said freely that she would wash it in the washing machine. He turned around and asked with surprise, "What uniform?" "What uniform?" She pulled up her checkered dress and said, "This." He looked horrified when she said it was just a normal high school uniform. He hesitantly asked, "Are you a high school student?" He immediately told her to forget everything he just said. She grumbled, telling him not to react like that. He exclaimed that it was absolutely impossible for a high school student to stay at his house. He shouted that it would make him a criminal. She replied that even if he said so, she was here last night, so it was too late now. He looked shocked, saying he wasn't home last night, but she emphasized that a high school student had stayed at his house. He let out a cry of horror as consciousness slowly came to him. She put her hand on her chin and wondered aloud, wondering what would happen if she was taken into protective custody by the police after being kicked out. She said that if the police asked her many questions, she would be forced to say that she had been at his house. She wondered what the police would think of him after hearing that. He shouted for her to wait a moment. She looked at him triumphantly and asked if he would let her stay. He could only look at her with worry, as she continues to succeed in convincing him to let her stay. Finally, he asked helplessly, "Do you really have any other choice?" She said she had been thinking and asked if his long hair was a hindrance. She asked him if he was trying to grow his hair long. He replied that getting a haircut is quite troublesome, so he doesn't get one. She excitedly said that she would cut his hair. Then he asked her if she really knew how to cut. She replied that she had never cut anyone's hair, but she cut her own bangs and other things. She flicked the scissors in front of him and said it would be okay. He looked horrified, but she just smiled and said she would make him look beautiful. He tried to tell her to stop for a moment, but she didn't pay attention. After all, he found himself sitting in the barber shop, while the barber was fixing his hair. He thanked the barber for his hard work and looked in the mirror. He looked back at himself, wondering how this happened. His hair is shorter now, and his eyes are clear. At this time, Nina was waiting for him outside and asked if he was done. She complimented him on how great he looked. She apologizes for messing up his hair, but says it's really beautiful. She told him to look at the clothes she had just bought and asked him to come with her. He tilted his head innocently and asked, "Where are you going?" She excitedly shouted, "Go on a date!" He was shocked but still followed her. She said that since she was going to stay at Ao's house, she needed to buy a few things, including a change of clothes. He quietly followed her from behind. She turned around and asked if he was listening. Noticing the distance between them, she wondered why he was so far away. He turned away and said that going so close would be a crime. She asked, "Are you still thinking about that?" She said that he looked suspicious walking so far away and that he would look more handsome than suspicious if he walked near her. But he insisted that there was no way. Walking closer would be like he was stalking her. She seemed a bit confused and said she didn't think so. She figured they could hold hands or something. He exclaimed in surprise, but she quickly changed the subject and told him not to go too far but to come closer. Suddenly someone called Miyake's name, saying sorry softly to attract his attention. Miyake turned around and saw a policeman adjusting his hat as he asked if he had a moment. Miyake worriedly thought it was over, but the police showed him a small, tattered teddy bear with a button for eyes and asked if it was his. He said he found it on the ground. Nina said it was hers and thanked the police. The police replied that it was nothing. The police leave peacefully and Nina tells Miyake to look, saying everything is fine. She smiled brightly at him and asked him to come along. His cheeks suddenly turned red, and he thought that it had been like that since yesterday. She drew him in, and now he is doing things that he could not normally imagine. He didn't feel too bad, but for some reason, he asked her if there was anything else she needed to buy. She made a sound like she was thinking. A stranger called Miyake's name and he immediately tensed up. The stranger noticed it and said he was selling magazines. Miyake wondered if this was the first time he did something like this. Thinking back, he realized he had never gone out since leaving the company. He thought that even if he went out, he would be too tired. It would be annoying to be around other people, and his only joy would be watching Nina's live stream. Everything else is boring. But then he looked at Nina in her normal student appearance and saw the image of Nina from the live stream standing there looking at him. He grabbed his face where the red color started to spread. He wondered what Nina was doing to him in her head. Suddenly, Nina ran up to him and called him her boyfriend. She apologizes for making him wait, and he stammers out that he's not her boyfriend or anything. But she cheerfully asked if he was sure, then suggested they get started. She's sorry for making him go through all this, but instead of accepting, he thanked her. She looked at him with wonder. He stroked his newly cut hair between his fingers and said that today had been really fun and things like this weren't bad at all. He smiled at her and said he was glad she took him with her today. She responded with a smile. She pointed out that he didn't have a desk at home and asked if it would be okay if she bought one. He asked if that was okay with her and asked if she needed to buy a futon. She looked at him quizzically, and he explained that he only had one futon. She exclaimed, "What?" All their commotion attracted someone's attention, who was looking away from the phone and saw her laughing about something. Nina, one of the live streamers, greeted everyone. "Long time no see!" She said that this is Amasaki Nina. She said her PC was having problems and she couldn't live stream. There were many comments asking if she had fixed her computer yet. Coco commented that the live stream was late, while others pointed out technical issues, such as her mic not sounding right. Another told her to relax. Nina read all that and said her computer wasn't fixed yet, so she was using a laptop. Another comment wrote excitedly that she was finally live streaming. Another person wrote that they could help fix her computer. She said that she actually planned to live stream only after she got a new computer, but she felt like she missed everyone so much. On a park bench, Miyaki covered his face with his hands. Emotions welled up in his heart. He wanted to scream that he loved her and that he also missed her very much. Her voice came from the phone, saying she would end the live stream early, although it seemed impossible with this laptop. In the room, Nina read the comments. Someone asked if the computer in heaven could be broken. Nina replies that she uses a human computer because she is a human sent to the heavenly realm. Another person commented that they had never heard of such a setup before. She told him not to call it a setup because that was already on the official website. The comments section suddenly became funny when a commenter laughed that she was promoting the website, LOL. Another person told her that she had fallen. The next person tried to defend her, saying she said it during the premiere and they didn't know then. Another comment said they would go check, but she still smiled and told them she would update them on future plans. Ao-san donated 100 yen and wrote that he was happy to see Nina live stream, and said that it had been a long time since she had live streamed. Later, when he returns home, she welcomes him. She apologized for making him leave during the live stream. She said it was too difficult to live stream on this laptop. He replied that it was okay and asked if his voice could be heard. He said in a serious voice that if Nina's live stream went wrong, he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. She laughed and said he was so serious it was funny. Speaking of which, he asked if she was okay with the live stream schedule. She scrolled through her phone and said that she told her manager that her computer was having problems, so she had to live stream less. She said she couldn't tell them she was running away from home. She told him that there was a person named Ao-san in the previous live stream. He jokingly asked if it was him, and thought he had donated as usual. She replied that that was his screen name, but then he argued that there could be someone else with the same name in her live stream. She asked if that was really possible. She confirmed that it was definitely Ao-san. She said that he had been commenting and doing all sorts of things since her debut live stream. And today he donated and said he was happy to watch her live stream. He became tense when she continued to say that he talked like Miyaki and that he didn't feel alive without Nina's live streams, or that the computer definitely couldn't handle the cuteness. Nina's, or something similar. He quickly covered his face with both hands to hide his embarrassment and told her that it was him and asked her to forgive him. She asked what to forgive him for. He replied that it was for everything. She exclaimed that it was crazy and said that it was fate. He looked at her with wonder. She said that's because not everyone has the opportunity to meet a viewer like this. She felt it was a destiny. She also complained that she easily admitted she was Nina when they first met. She said that she thought about her fans' feelings and wondered if she should lie, but now it's too late to do that. She apologized to him for this. He tells her that she only said it because he asked in the first place, so she doesn't need to apologize. He said he was surprised and shouldn't have been, but even though he asked who was behind the screen, Nina was still Nina to him. He sat next to her, and with an unchanging smile, he affirmed that Nina was very special to him. She called his name, and then boldly asked if he was in love. He raised his hands defensively and stammered that he really liked Nina, but he was talking about the virtual Nina. He said it wasn't that he was in love or wanted a relationship, it was simply that Nina was very special to him. He argued that saying he wanted to be with Nina was ridiculous. She patted her cheek and said, "For example, if Nina had a boyfriend, would he hate it?" He hesitated to answer, but finally said that she was talking about the person behind Nina. She agreed that he was right. He looked away and replied vaguely that in that case he didn't mind and that it was a private matter. Instead, he said they should keep it a secret. He said he wants everyone to have their own private space. However, he doubted that everyone would think the same as him. He looked down and said, that's why he thought she said he should keep it a secret from his audience. Then he turned around and shouted that it was just his opinion. She laughed and said she knew he would say that. He asked if she had such a person. She playfully replied that she said it was just an example. He accepted that answer. However, her face turned sad when he wasn't there, as she looked at the conversations on the phone. The person was asking when they could meet and asserted that if she didn't come to school, that was fine, but she should call them. Nina sat in the corner of the classroom thinking this was bad. She had no one to talk to. She told herself that even though the class had just changed, she still didn't go to school. She wondered why she couldn't talk to everyone in class when she could do it easily on live stream. Suddenly, a voice called Shiraishi's name. 2 girls stood there asking if she had a moment. In her head, she silently shouted that they were talking to her. She happily asked what was wrong. But they immediately got straight to the point and asked what her relationship with Yaotome was. She froze and said that May and she had known each other for a long time. The 2 girls exclaimed, one of them saying she called Yaotome by her real name. She realized that was exactly what they wanted to know. However, a guy approached them and asked if they were talking about him. Yaotome tilted his head and threatened that if they had anything to do with him, to come see him directly. The girls were embarrassed but still left. Say nothing matters. He sighed, as if he had just done the most boring thing, and tells Shiraishi that it's funny that she still has no friends. She shouted that it was her fault. He asked how it was. She says it's because Mei-kun stole all the girls' hearts. He bluntly replied that he didn't understand what she was saying, but he said it was okay, because she still had him. She looked at him as he stood confidently next to her. He asked her what she was doing to drop out of school. He said he texted her, but she ignored him. She apologized and said she wasn't home yet, so she was busy. He asked if she was okay. She replied that she was staying with an acquaintance, but that she was fine. He looked at her incredulously and said that this reminded him, asked if she went shopping in front of the station last week. She hesitantly replied that it was probably her. He asked her if she was with a guy, but she replied that he was wrong. She was going alone. He called her Shiraishi and said that it was her with a guy. His face showed a mischievous smile. Meanwhile, Miyaki was in his apartment, looked at the boxes piled up in the room and wondered what he was supposed to do with all this. Shiraishi had told him that she wanted to order some items and would have them delivered here. He didn't expect that things would appear this way. He wondered what was going on. He looked at the invoice and read that it was computer equipment. Excited, he wondered if it was for Nina to live stream. He smiled and thought that this was probably the last one. Now he wondered if she could live stream with all this. Then he realized that the equipment was too much. He exclaimed that she was ready to settle down with all this. He said loudly that it was time. He asked her why she left home. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and he wondered if it was her. He opened the door and saw her looking at him worriedly. He picked her up in confusion. She said she was home but needed to talk to him. He replied that he also needed to tell her, but she loudly said that could be done later. She is in a hurry, and a voice rang out from behind her, calling her Shiraishi. He looked at her as she looked away. He is thinking a lot in his head. Yotomi stepped forward and said, as he thought. He looked at Miyaki and said that it was the person Shiraishi was with the other day. He asked Shiraishi what was really going on. Miyaki looked at the 2 high school students standing in front of him. He wondered who this person was and what was really going on here. He looked between them. Yotomi suddenly turned to him and asked who Miyaki was. Yotome looked at Miyaki with indignant eyes and asked if they were living together. Miyaki silently exclaimed in his mind that this person was scary. Yaotomi suddenly pulled Shiraishi close and said that he was her boyfriend. Even Shiraishi was surprised by that, but Miyaki didn't notice as he repeated what he had just heard. Nina's boyfriend? He thought it was a private matter, but in his head he argued that she was Nina, and he knew it. His mind was confused. He couldn't think clearly. But then he heard Shiraishi scream that that wasn't right. She tells May not to say strange things. She said that the pond was frozen. She apologized to him and said Yaotome was her childhood friend, and May said it without permission. She explained that she had told him that the day before. She said she didn't have a boyfriend and that she wasn't lying. Yaotome called Tsukasa and asked, "Is this a crime?" He asked if Miyaki realized that she was underage. He said it was illegal to bring an underage person home. then put the phone to his ear and said that if so, he would call the police. Miyaki stiffened, thinking that this was his death sentence. But Shiraishi told him to wait a moment and asked him to follow her, saying they needed to talk. She apologizes to Miyaki again and says they will talk later. After that, she left behind a stunned Miyaki. At the park, Shiraishi tries to convince Yotome. She says she just asked him to let her stay and not blame Aosan for this. But Yotome replied that it was impossible and said that she should go find him first. He also said that she could come to his house instead. She thought about going to Meikun's house, but said she would cause trouble for his mother. However, he argued, what if he did something to her? She screams that Aosan is not that kind of person. She said she never had trouble with him. Yaotome insisted that Aosan was waiting for an opportunity to catch her off guard, but she replied that Aosan never even asked her name. She looked at him with skeptical eyes and said she just gave him her contact information, but Aosan still kept his distance. She says she will eventually leave Aosan's house, as she believes he is trying not to get too involved. That's why she sincerely told him that Aosan was fine. Yotome was silent for a few minutes, then said he was going home. Before leaving, he turned around and told him that if anything happened, please tell him immediately. Leaving the park, he wondered why she said everything was fine. He turned his head and thought it was impossible, wondering if she liked Aosan. She arrived at Miyaki's apartment and immediately apologized for what happened earlier, but she found him curled up into a ball. She said that she talked to Meikun about this matter. She asked if he was okay. He raised his head and said he had thought about turning himself in before being reported to the police. Shiraishi yells that she won't report him. She means because she ordered too many things. He stood up, rubbed the back of his head and asked about the person from before, Meikun, if he was back yet. She smiled brightly and said that Meikun really wanted a girlfriend. She bet he was very surprised. She said she was asked 5 times. He was surprised and exclaimed, 5 times? But she said she turned them down every time. She said she thought maybe she should accept. But what she loves most is live streaming. She reminded him not to tell Meikun about her live stream. She also said that Meikun said she could stay at his house. But Meikun lives with his mother, and it's difficult. She said why should she bother them? She can't even live stream. Then she guessed that she was bothering him and whispered a small apology. He said it was still not a good idea for her to stay at his house. But that doesn't mean she has to leave. He says the problem is she can't go home now. He sat next to her, look her in the eyes and say that's why. He asked if she could at least tell him why she left. She asked him what he wanted to know, and he replied that he just knew she had an argument with her parents. Instead of answering, she asked him if he was hungry or if he had eaten anything. He said no, and firmly asked if she didn't want to hear this serious matter. He said he was very serious. She just smiled brightly and said that it's a good idea to eat something while talking about something important. She posed smartly and told him to eat later. He sat across from her and asked why they were at a karaoke bar. She replied that this was a family restaurant and they felt uncomfortable. He thought to himself, wouldn't it be better to eat at home? She says this place is private, he can order food, and she can sing. She exclaimed that this was the most wonderful thing. She picked up the device and he looked at her, asking if she was going to sing. She replied that he had come this far, so why didn't she sing? She asked him if he wanted to hear Nina sing. Without hesitation, he said directly that he wanted to hear. Then, he muttered in his heart, he thought they shouldn't talk about this anymore. He reiterated that he was trying to be serious here. He said he knew talking about it probably wouldn't change anything. But if there's anything I can do, I want to do it. He told her to talk to him. She lowered her head and said it wasn't that she didn't want to talk. But there is a certain order to things like this, he muttered. But she interrupted and asked instead if he was going to ask her real name. He raised his hands as if to defend himself, saying he had no intention of asking that. She asks if that's how he feels, but then says he'll still ask why she left home. She rested her chin on her hand and said that if so, he should ask her name too. She said that she knew Ao wouldn't spread rumours, but he said that she was from Talbum. She tells him that the online Nina is actually Shiraishi. He asked if her real name was also Nina. She replied that her name uses kanji characters. She said that when deciding on a name, she wanted to choose one that would be easy to cover up if her real name was accidentally said. He laughed. She asked why he was smiling. He replied that when she made a big deal out of this, he thought it would be completely different. She leaned forward, placing her hands on the table. She said that she really liked Ao's smiley face. His cheeks were slightly red. When she told him that when she first met him, he looked like he was about to die. But he still smiled and talked about Nina. even laughed with her. Not only Nina, she expressed her joy. Then she stood up and suggested he cut his hair, asking why he didn't show his face a bit. She lifted his hair and told him she liked him as he parted his hair. She asked him if anything was wrong, then awkwardly said she didn't mean it that way. He smiled slightly and said he knew. He put his hand to his lips, thinking that he understood what she wanted to say. The two sat in silence after that. And he suggested that after she finished eating, they should go home. She agreed with him. Then when they were walking together, Shiraishi suddenly said that they were just eating and talking about names. Then she said this was the first time she went to karaoke without singing. Miyaki froze. He remembered that he wanted to hear her sing. She apologized, saying she hadn't sung for him directly. He still replied that it was okay and said that it wasn't something he usually had the opportunity to do, but she reminded him that he said he wanted to listen. He tried to calm down and thought to himself, it was true that he wanted to hear her sing. Maybe he'll never have that chance again. She said she also wanted to sing, then tilted his head playfully and said that so they should go back. He looked at her when she said it looked like it was going to rain, so they should hurry. He wondered how long she would stay, but I thought it would be okay if I just gave it a little more time. Sureshi looked at the thermometer in her hand, which read 38.5 degrees Celsius, and said that as she expected, he was sick after all. Miyaki lay on the futon with a Nina-shaped body pillow next to her, but outside the blanket. She asked him if he felt okay, then mentioned that it had started to rain on their way home from karaoke, and they were both soaked. He weakly apologized through his fever dream. She put her hands on her hips and said there were no drugs here, asking if he could wait until the pharmacy opened. But he said it was okay, and she should prioritize studying. More importantly, he called her Shiraishi, and she wondered why he used her last name. She told him he could call her Nina. He brought up the story of her friend at that time, but she waved it off, saying that Meikun was just trying to be cool. She told him not to worry about him. Then she asked him what he needed. He asked if she could stay at the internet cafe or somewhere else today. She looked at him questioningly. He replied that he didn't want the cold to affect Nina's live stream. She smiled and asked, isn't it too late for that? Moreover, she hasn't installed the equipment to live stream yet, so there's nothing she can do. He said it didn't matter. She called his name, but there was no response. Then asked if he had fallen asleep. She lifted the hair from his forehead and realized he had a very high fever. Worried, she wondered if it was safe to leave him home alone, but muttered that she had to go to school. She asked, even though he was fast asleep, if he was okay while she was away. She looked at her phone, saw it was 7:58, and exclaimed that things were getting worse. She turned around to leave, but looked at him one last time, saying she was going. Before closing the door, she heard a small word of concern from him. She wondered what to do now. Then happily thought that Ao could speak without using honorifics. She wondered why Ao looked like this right now, so cute at home. Miyaki, lying in the middle of the futon, thought to himself that he felt he had made a mistake. I'm so tired. But in times like these, he always hated it because he often had nightmares. In the dream, a woman told him that the rumors of Aoba cheating were not spread by her. She told him that he was exactly what everyone around him thought he was. She suggested breaking up, saying that the two of them shouldn't waste each other's time anymore. She bluntly said there was no need to be clearer, and she doesn't need someone like you. Afterwards, Shiraishi said that she had gone home as she entered the room, holding her phone in her hand. Miyaki was still sleeping soundly. She asked him if he had been sleeping all this time. Miyaki let out an annoyed sound. She mumbled that he moaned a lot and wondered if he was okay, or if she should wake him up. She asked him if he got the medicine. Miyaki didn't answer, but quietly whispered Nina's name. Shiraishi stopped, but then showed a mischievous smile and lay down next to him. She jokingly asked if he called and told her it was Nina. She said today was special, because she will be right next to you. She told him to get well soon, then completely rested her head on his futon, next to the pillow. She gently lifted a few strands of sweaty hair from his forehead and thought that he was always kind. But that's because you're Nina. What if she wasn't Nina? Suddenly he turned around and wrapped his arms around her, placing her head close to his chest. She softly called his name and wondered if he was sleeping. Her face began to turn red from embarrassment. She called him and tried to wake him up, but he only moved slightly, his arms still wrapped around her. She thought everything was fine until he fainted on top of her, trapping her underneath. Later, at work, Miyaki wondered what he had done while holding a mop. His manager stood right next to him, turned to ask if he was talking to her. He just replied that he was talking to himself. He thought he was definitely being avoided. He remembered the moment she stopped and said it was okay when he asked if she needed help. Then she said that she would eat alone today. He knew that since the day he had a fever, Nina had been acting very strange. He thought he slept all day that day and didn't really know what happened. He worriedly wondered if something had happened while he was sleeping. He restlessly pondered that he did not understand. His manager observed Miyaki's inner turmoil and asked if anything was wrong. When she said that maybe he liked someone, he turned back to look at her. His cheeks turned red when she pointed out that he had cut his hair and changed his appearance. She said she thought it might be because of a girl and asked if Miyaki had found a girl in real life that he liked. He tried to deny it, but the manager continued to say that she knew she had received these tickets as a gift, but thought he should use them. She gave him 2 movie tickets and said she didn't watch this genre, but it was very popular with girls his age. She told him to do his best, then gave him the ticket before leaving him wondering if she liked the movie. After leaving the cinema, Shiraishi commented that the movie was surprisingly quite interesting. She excitedly said that the scene where the shark and penguin merge at the end of the movie was amazing. He expressed his joy that she liked it, and realized that she was interested in things like this. She said the owner was kind enough to give them those tickets. Miyaki thought that when he invited her, she came as usual. He guessed he had been worrying for no reason about her avoiding him. As he walked right behind her, she suddenly turned around as if she had just remembered something, but then got confused because they were standing too close to each other. She muttered, "It's okay," then stepped back. He felt worried, thinking that she was deliberately avoiding him. As for Shiraishi, she thought the situation was terrible, because every time she was near Ao, her heart began to pound. An annoyed voice rang out, asked them what Ao was doing. They both turned and saw Yaotome standing there with a frown on her face. Shiraishi smiled and said that he really came. Miyaki exclaimed in surprise, "You called him!" She replied that she told Yatome she was going to the movies, and he said he would come. Miyaki pointed out that they had already seen the movie, but Shiraishi said that she really didn't think Yatome would come. He texted her asking if she was free today, but she said she was going to the movies with Usan. Then he said he would come along. She texted back that if he left now, he might be able to make it in time for the show. However, Yaotomi bluntly said that he didn't care about the movie and asked why the two of them were here together. Isn't her staying at his house enough? Miyaki opened his mouth to explain, but Shiraishi gently pulled Yaotome's sleeve and asked permission to speak to him privately. His eyes widened when he saw her big round eyes, and he blushed. He shouted, "What are you doing so suddenly?" But Nina thought she was okay with Meikun, and wondered why Ao-san made her heart skip a beat. Shiraishi tells himself that that's not what Usan was about, and that what happened the other day was just an accident. She let go of Yatome's sleeve and said, "Okay, thank you, that's enough." Yaotomi asked irritably, "What just happened?" She then told them both to wait here, then said she was going to check out the souvenirs from the movie. After a moment of silence, the atmosphere around Miyaki became tense and awkward. Yaotome also remained silent for a while, then suddenly spoke up asking if Miyaki liked Shiraishi. Miyaki was surprised by this question, but Yatome continued, "Otherwise, what would you gain by hiding such a young person?" Nina, in the distance, thought about how she had been at Aosen's house for several days, and wondered why she felt so nervous now. She looked at her phone when the notification sound sounded, then frowned when she realized it was from her manager. Meanwhile, Miyaki began to answer, with Yaotome's words echoing in his head, asking if he liked Shiraishi. But immediately, Shiraishi appeared in front of him, held up his phone, and exclaimed that this was bad. She said she just received a call from her manager at home. Miyaki quickly interrupted and asked Yaotome if he could talk here. Yaotomi tilted her head in confusion, and when she looked at him, Nina realized that he knew nothing about her live streams. Nina looked at him with shock, then said they could discuss this later. Yaotomi frowned deeper and asked, "What are you talking about?" He asked if she was hiding something from him, then confirmed that Miyaki knew something. He continued asking, "Why does Miyaki know and I don't?" Nina muttered a small apology without daring to look at him. Yaotomi turned away, saying firmly that he understood and would go home. She called after him, but he told her to talk to Miyaki as much as she wanted. He grumbled as he walked away, thinking he was the first person she called out. "And before now, there was only you." He remembered the days they grew up together, mumbling that he was alone before, and he should have been there. Miyagi quietly asked her if she should run after him. Nina says she will contact Yaotome later, and says he often does things like this. Putting that aside, she exclaimed that this situation was extremely bad. She explained that the office had called to say they would send something to Nina, and it seemed they had sent a letter. Miyaki asked if it was something she needed to sign for. She replied that it wasn't that, but that she just didn't want anyone to see the letter. She said she was running away from home and getting the papers could cause trouble. She closed her eyes, sighed, and said she really didn't want to go home, but still had to go back to get the letter. However, she worries that Ao is only letting her stay because she can't go home, and she thought that if she came back, he would not allow her to stay with him anymore. Miyaki, on the other hand, was worried when he realized she really didn't want to go home. He put his hand on his chin and thought, perhaps her family treated her poorly. The image of her tear-stained face appeared in his mind, and he thought that if she came back to get the letter and met her parents, what would happen? He asked if he should go with her to get the mail. She hesitated and asked again if he intended to come to her house with her, and then she would be able to come back to stay with him. He replied that she was right, but then realized that that meant he would know where she lived. He said that on second thought, maybe he shouldn't go, but she said it was okay, and she wanted him to come with her. Then they stood in front of an apartment, and Miyaki realized that he was actually there. Besides the elevator, he said he would wait outside. She asked what the meaning of his coming was, and in addition, she said she didn't think anyone would be here. She pressed the elevator button. He asked if both her parents worked. She replied that her father was at work, but her mother... Then she said they weren't here, so it would be fine. They went to her door, and she told him there was no one there and invited him in. Miyaki thought about entering Oshi's house, wondering if a fan like him was allowed to do this. She said she would go find the letter and asked him to wait here. I agree. He realized he was quite nervous. He asked if she lived with her father, and if it was just the two of them together. She replied that yes, it was just the two of them, because her mother had left. Then she exclaimed, "Found it, great!" She said the letter appeared unopened. Suddenly a voice rang out from behind, making her stiffen. She turned around and saw her father standing at the door. She said she thought he was at work. He replied that he lived nearby, so he stopped by on his way back to work. He turned to look at Miyaki with questioning eyes, his suspicious eyes never changing. Athena quickly stepped in front of Miyaki and said that he was just a friend who happened to be with her when she stopped by the house. Her father didn't beat around the bush and asked directly if he would take care of her while she left home. She bowed her head and confirmed it. He said that after she left the house without permission, "Do you feel ashamed for causing trouble to others?" Miyaki asked him to wait a moment, walked out from behind her, and told her father that she was not bothering him. He insisted that it was his idea for her to stay at his house, for she was alone in the dark and tried to fend for herself. However, the man said that he appreciated Miyaki's concern, but he was still certain. He said he could clearly understand what was happening to his daughter. He said that perhaps she forced him to agree to let her stay. Miyaki tried to deny it, but her father continued that it was always like that. When things don't go her way, she ignores her parents, even though she's never run away from home before. He said that she was always looking for recognition and just wanted to attract people's attention. He also mentioned that she started doing meaningless things like live streaming, and the letter she received was also related to that. He said he told her to stop, and couldn't believe that his daughter was involved in such trivial things. He added that she should not embarrass the family anymore. However, Miyaki spoke up, saying he didn't think it was embarrassing, and calling it meaningless or trivial. Miyaki exclaims that it's not like that. Playing the role of another person and creating live streams for everyone to enjoy, it's not easy at all. He asked her father if he thought she put a lot of heart and effort into what she did. You said that Nina has a lot of fans. Thousands of people watch her streams, and that's amazing. Making many people smile is not meaningless. He emphasized that it was the thoughts and effort that she put into the live streams has helped save many lives. Therefore, he strongly asked her father to take back what he said. After all, her father did not give in. Instead, he admitted that his words were somewhat harsh. However, he said this is a family matter, and it would be best for Miyaki to leave. Miyaki thought he was right, but right behind him, Nina grabbed his shirt and asked if he was going to leave. She said that if he went, she would go with him. Miyaki looked at her questioningly and said that she had come this far, so she should talk to her father properly. But she replied that there was no point in talking to her father, because he wouldn't listen to what she wanted to say. That's why she left home. She said it was always like that. He didn't even listen to her mother, and that's why her mother left. She added that even though she couldn't stay with Ao, she would go and find another place. She turned around, ready to leave, but Miyaki blocked her path and said she knew this wouldn't solve anything. She stubbornly said she would come back to him, because you yourself said so. He turned to her father and said it had come to this. He put the business card on the table and said this was his address and contact information. Her father asked him what he meant, and Miyaki explained that he was just a complete stranger and he understood that this was a bit excessive, but he asked her father for permission to let Nina stay with him a little longer. He said that even if they talked right now, for many reasons, he didn't think the conversation would have a good outcome. So he begged her father to give Nina a little more time, and bowed before him to ask for it. Her father remained stern, but said he would write down his contact information. He added that even if he stopped her, she would run away again. He admitted that, compared to not knowing where she was, at least knowing she was safe was better. He says this is definitely better. Miyaki thanked her father and promised that if anything happened, he would contact him immediately. Her father said everything was okay and he needed to go back to work. After that, he said there was no need to say anything more. Nina didn't look him in the eye when he left, but when they left the house, she thanked Miyaki for saying those things to her father. She said that he must have been surprised because the reason she left home was so insignificant. He responded that she told him that she didn't get along with her parents, and now he knew the reason was because they were against her being a VTuber. She said it was just a normal argument between parents and children, then asked if that was why she should go home. Before she could say more, he interrupted her and told her he didn't think so. He bent down to eye level with her, as if talking to a child, and told Nina that things had not been easy for Nina. He said that all this time, she couldn't go home. Immediately, she burst into tears. She remembered her father telling her that enough was enough, and her mother appearing when she told her about the entrance ceremony. He told her not to waste his time on such things. Her father was always like that, and her mother once said that since she was in high school, she can take care of herself. After that day, her mother never returned home again. Later, at school, Yaotomi asked her if she wanted to go somewhere after school. She replied with a hum, but her eyes widened when she saw it. Audition promotional poster for Niji Live VTuber. She wasn't sure, but she just wanted someone to see her. She wondered if being VTubers would be okay. Her mother once asked if this was a suspicious company, but Nina said no. It's a famous company. Her mother agreed and said she would at least sign the form for her. Her mother said she didn't want her father to know that she was still seeing her. Nina replied that she understood, and her mother added that this would be the last time they would do this together. After that, her mother told her that her parents were officially divorced. Nina asks if that means her mother has decided on custody of her yet, but her mother just told her to get along with her father. Nina could only sit there in shock. Then, when she live-streamed, Nina thanked viewers for coming to watch her broadcast today. At first, her streams did not go well. She told her viewers that she would be happy if they could tune in to the next stream. She secretly thought that today's stream was so bad, she couldn't say anything. After the broadcast ended, she read the comments. One commenter wrote that she seemed more nervous than expected, even for her first live stream. Nina sighed, but was quickly elated when she realized she had also received a lot of positive comments. She repeated to herself that she didn't care, but actually, she used to think that only big VTuber fans would watch her. However, there are people like this too. When reading Aosun's comment, he said that this was the first time he watched such a broadcast. He was cheering for her, sending her a 500 yen donation and telling her to keep up the good work. She thanks him for finding her. When she saw that the number of subscribers had reached 682,000, she was happy to have more and more followers. She told herself that maybe it was because the live stream was longer than last time. In the comments, Miyaki asked if Nina usually does longer live streams. She thought she could only live stream when her father was not at home. But since this was a job and very popular, she wondered if she should talk to her father. However, when she mentioned, her father was just suspicious and said he knew she was doing something secretly. He asked if she was planning on doing this with the exam coming up. He told her that she should only do such things after she stepped out into society and became independent. He claims that children like her just want to be mischievous and she won't understand. She mutters that this is work, and she was even paid by the company. But he bluntly said that the work she was doing was based on a short-lived trend. He said it wouldn't last forever, and when that job disappeared, he asked what she had left. He questioned whether, when that happened, she would be able to put this on her resume. He doubted whether this work was something she could write about and be recognized for, and emphasized that the company and the people watching those live streams are not responsible for her life. She tried to argue that there were many people looking forward to her live streams, but her father replied that those people would quickly find a replacement, because it doesn't have to be you. In frustration, she rushed into her room, packed her luggage and angrily shouted, "Why is he always like that?" She told herself that she shouldn't have said anything, and wonder why Dad doesn't listen to me. Looking at her savings book, she thought that it would be okay if she went out on her own, because she already had a lot of savings. She decided to stay at an internet cafe for a while. She thought that the only way for her father to find her was through her live stream. Even though she partly understood what her father said, she still decided to leave. When arriving at the internet cafe, the assistant returned her card and said that minors were not allowed to stay after 10 p.m. The assistant said that high school students must be accompanied by an adult. She asked Nina if she understood. She looked through her phone and thought to herself that she didn't know that the loan contract required written parental consent. As for her mother, she couldn't ask for her help. Nina thinks she has a lot of followers, but none of them can help her in real life. Now she understands that everyone loves Amasaki Nina, but not the real Nina. Kata Takinokan comments that Nina must have a good relationship with her family, as he can feel it through her stories. She burst into tears, thinking that the real Nina was not the same as the image of Nina that everyone knew. In the end, there was nothing, and she guessed that no one would find her. She read a few more comments, asking if there would be no live stream. Another comment said that Nina didn't stream today, but asked if anyone had seen Akari's singing performance. That's when she realized Miyaki was looking at her. But she only saw Nina's keychain dropped on the road. She picked it up and ran after Miyaki, thinking that he couldn't leave Nina here. She begged him. Tears are still flowing, don't leave her behind. She lightly tapped his shoulder, thinking she was standing right in front of him. Even though she wasn't the Nina he loved, she smiled, pointed to the keychain and said, "You dropped this." Nina thought that maybe anyone else could feel the same way she did. But on that day, it was he who found her at the apartment. She burst into tears, saying that was why her mother divorced and left, and her father never listened to what she had to say. His eyes widened when he realized that he had made her cry. She grabbed his shirt, pulled gently and asked if he was listening. He told himself that he wanted to listen to her seriously, but when she looked down at her hand holding her clothes, he was worried that if anyone saw this scene, a crying little girl and a strange man who was not a resident of the block, it would be bad. He suggested they go home and talk there. She agreed and gently apologized. Says she knows it's annoying when he has to listen to everything, but he reassured her, saying it wasn't like that. I really want to hear what Nina-sen has to say. That's why he advised her to go home. She looked at him intently, thinking that this was always the case. Even when he knew she was Nina, he still cared about her. She remembered when he said that it didn't change the fact that Nina was always special to him. Nina thought he did his best to help her, and she remembered when he suggested that they should try to repair the relationship between her and her parents. Miyaki is someone who is willing to look for her. She softly said that she liked him. He was momentarily stunned, then said he didn't hear what she just said and asked again. But she immediately said loudly that it was nothing. Really nothing. She turned away and said they should go. He was still blushing, realizing she wasn't following him. She repeated that it was nothing, then held his hand and asked if this was okay. Just a little longer. The next morning, she wrote a message to the manager, wishing her good morning and apologizing for disturbing her so early. She wrote that she was contacting because she had a question to ask. A message bubble appeared when she asked if it was company policy that VTubers were not allowed to have romantic relationships. She stared at her phone until the answer came. The manager asked if Nina-san had found anyone she liked. They wrote that they were sure the company would not object, but reminded her to keep her personal life separate from her image on stream. The manager also wrote that it would not be good to limit her too much because she has her own life. The company's policy always prioritizes the streamer's emotions. Nina immediately sat up, exclaiming if that was true. She thought they would say no, but now she realizes that liking Ao-san is completely okay. She realized it brightly and repeated that there was no problem with her liking Ao-san. Later, while Miyaki was on shift, standing in front of the staff room looking at his phone, the store owner called him out. She asked him if anything was wrong and asked him back if he wasn't planning to go home yet. He replied that he was just about to leave and asked if he should stay. She loudly said that there was no need and urged him to go home. She said there was a girl waiting for him in front of the store. He walked out and saw Nina standing there. She bid him a good morning. He asked what was wrong and she replied that she was just wondering if Al-san was here, so she glanced at the cashier. Another employee approached and Nina told him he worked the night shift. She asked, "Are there no women working here?" He replied that during the day there were, but at night it was almost all men. Her face lit up, making him worried and wondering what just happened. He thought that she had never been to his work before. Maybe after the incident with her father, she was nervous about being alone. He wondered if she was still having trouble. Thinking that her father had left her in his care, Miyaki felt responsible. He asked her if she wanted to go somewhere after her shift ended. She asked him if he was done with his shift and if it was for a change of pace. She replied that it was okay, but he suggested that they hadn't spent much time at the theatre last time, so if it would make her feel more comfortable, they should go. She exclaims that he is right, and they should go. In her mind, she thought this was a date. Nina apologized, saying she had left the house unlocked and didn't have the key with her. He replied that he also wanted to go home and change, so it was okay. After that, they went to an aquarium together and stood watching the penguins. Nina excitedly exclaimed that they were so cute. He thought it was a good thing that she was so active. He turned to her and said that she looked different today. She grabbed her hair and said she woke up early and curled her hair. He said he didn't know if he should say this, but she really looked good with this hairstyle. However, he also said that her usual appearance is also very beautiful. She asked if this style would look better. He smiled and said he thought so. Her eyes filled with heart shapes at the thought that he found her cute even when she was normal. She hesitantly asked if he wanted a girlfriend. He stopped, looked away and quietly replied no. He said he hadn't thought about it much, but she argued that Ausen loved Nina. She asked if he was dating the person behind Nina. She asks if that makes him happy. He awkwardly mentioned the person behind and asked if she was talking about herself. She exclaimed that yes, but then said it was just an example. She asked if he could go on a date with her. Would he do so? She looked at him, hoping to get an answer. But he wondered if he could date Nina. Finally, he replied that it was impossible. She asked why, and he replied that because Nina was still a minor. He said that it was not a good thing for them to live together, despite her father's permission. Now, dating her is a completely different matter. His sweat dropped as he waited for her reaction, but she just laughed and said she was glad he didn't hate her. She then added that she heard that adults and high school students can date as long as they both agree. She pulled out her phone and started searching for information. She pulled up an article titled, "Is dating between an adult and a young person a crime?" She started to say that what she said earlier was just an example, but now she wants to tell the truth. However, he interrupted and said that adults and adolescents are not the same, and that is not okay for many reasons. He asserted that even if they both agreed, he asked what people around them would say. He said that people usually don't accept such things, and even though she said it was consensual, I don't think anyone would believe that. Her eyes opened wide, when remembering what he once told her, that there were rumors that he was the one who cheated, even though he told the truth. No one believed him. She apologizes to you, said that she was very selfish and didn't think about his feelings right now. She bowed her head to admit her mistake, then told him to forget what she just asked and pretend she hadn't said anything. She takes his hand between hers and says that instead she will do everything properly and properly. Nina asked him to let her speak one more time. When she turns 18, she will ask him again. She let go of his hand and apologized for holding his hand. He said it was okay and asked if she would turn 18 this year. "And is your birthday the same as Nina's?" She replied that no, her birthday is next month. He smiled, but inside he was panicking because that day was very close. Meanwhile, Nina's father loosens his tie and says things are not okay. He said she told him he would be successful if he started a business. She even gave up her job to accompany him. He told her to just wait a little longer, but she said this was a waste of time. She suggested breaking up, sighed loudly, and said that if he had known so in advance. She chose Aoba. She looked at his photo on the phone. Nina mutters whether dating is really necessary. She wondered if being friends would be better for them. She said that she just liked being friends with him, which is what she told May. She said she had other things she wanted to do right now, so she said she didn't really want a boyfriend or anything like that. Yatomi wondered if it was really impossible and wished she would just say it out loud. He asked if she had any plans tomorrow. "And is it your birthday?" He further asked if she went out and did anything every year on her birthday. She didn't answer. Just look at the phone with eyes full of affection. Meanwhile, the phone conversation is still open. He asked her if she had a favorite type of cake, and she replied that she liked everything. He pressed her for a clearer answer, and she said she had a plan. He looked up from his books and realized something. He exclaimed that she had plans with the other person from before. A flash of lightning flashed past him when he saw her smile on the phone with eyes full of love that he had never received. Then suddenly, she was pulled out of her reverie. She called May's name from behind, but realized that he was gone. Outside of school, with the bag on her back, Yotomi wondered what she was doing. He was so shocked that he unconsciously left school early. He thought he would miss class like this. Looking at the phone, he shouted that it was all Miyake's fault and said that she was joking with him. He told himself that he should have reported him before, but now he couldn't do that. The image of her smile appeared in his mind again. He decided to give up this thought, thinking it was unreasonable. He had never seen her smile like that before, and realized that it was the smile she would give to someone she liked. He wondered what could make a high school student happy. The salesperson asked if she could help Miyaki find something. He awkwardly said he was fine. He thought that if he didn't choose early, the staff might start to pressure him. I remember that she said they would talk when she turned 18, and he knew that next time he would have to answer her properly. And Nina wondered if it would be okay to talk to him right on her birthday. She was worried that it might embarrass him, and she didn't want to create a strange atmosphere on her birthday. She decided not to mention it tomorrow, and think they should have fun instead of making things complicated. That's what she thought, at least. But now she wondered why things had turned out like this when she was lying on top of Miyaki, making him confused. She was confused, don't understand what's going on. And Miyaki also immediately realized that this was not okay. Initially, everything went well. Today is Nina-san's birthday, and they decided to hold it at home. He gave her a gift, and they both ate cake. But then suddenly Nina-san started acting strangely. Her face was red, and suddenly jumped on him, leading to the current situation. He lay there, with Nina on top of him, wondering what was happening to her. He recalled similar scenes from before, when he was at his old job, attending drinking parties and having to deal with drunk co-workers. He looked at the cake and suddenly thought of wine. The seller told him that this cake contained Western alcohol and warned him to be careful with children and people with alcohol intolerance. Those words echoed in his head, and he realized that was the problem. He apologized to Nina and said it was because he didn't think about this when buying the cake. But instead of listening to him, Nina didn't listen to him, and suddenly confessed that she loved him, while her dress slid off one shoulder. His mind was confused, wondering what he should do in this situation. He turned his head away, thinking that this was what people said when they were drunk. Even though she is 18 years old, she is still just a high school student. Nina repeated her confession and asked him to answer as an adult. She said that before they couldn't date because she was still a minor, but now she asked him to answer frankly. She asks how he feels about her, urgently asked him to express his feelings. He began to think about his feelings, but suddenly, Nina whispered that she felt tired, and then fell asleep on him. He asked in surprise if she just said she was sleepy. She replied that she didn't sleep at all last night, for unknown reasons, but she was looking forward to tomorrow so much that she couldn't sleep. He told her that if she wanted to sleep, she should lie on the futon. Miyaki breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Nina was finally asleep, while she snored softly on top of him. I think I love you is easy to say, but maybe she's not fully aware of it. The next morning, Nina woke up with messy hair. She doesn't remember anything after eating that cake, and wondered why Aosan was curled up sleeping in the corner of the room like that. When I saw him curled up in a blanket in the corner of the room, she wondered why he didn't sleep on the futon with her. Quietly, she sat down next to him and leaned her head against the wall. She thought that yesterday was her birthday, and gently rested her head on his shoulder, but suddenly there was a knock on the door that startled her. She wondered if it was the same game she ordered the day before. If so, you can go out and receive it. However, when opened, she saw Naki standing there. Nina realized that it wasn't the delivery person, and she began to think with horror who this person might be. But before she could think any further, the woman in front of her spoke up, commenting mockingly on her. "A young girl like this. Maybe his taste has changed?" The woman continued. "I know he was abandoned by an older woman, but this is a bit too much, isn't it?" Miyaki suddenly appeared from behind the door, facing the woman's teasing smile with an expression full of unresolved pain. "Long time no see," she said, and he calmly asked her why she appeared after all this time. He insisted that they had nothing to say to each other. She told him not to be so cold. She begins to mention their past, but Miyaki interrupts, asking her to wait a moment. He said they shouldn't talk about those things here. Nina looked at him worriedly. Miyaki slammed the door in the woman's face, saying he would go out soon. He went back inside, apologized to Nina, and said he would go out for a moment. He said there was cake from yesterday in the refrigerator, and if you're hungry, you can eat. Miyaki was about to step out, but suddenly felt a hand tugging his shirt from behind. He turned around, only to meet Nina's worried eyes. She released her hand from his shirt and apologized, saying it was nothing. They were silent for a minute. Before leaving, he gently said that he would return as soon as possible. Nina thought about the woman who had just appeared, telling herself that there was no mistake. That's his ex-girlfriend. She panicked when she thought that that was the type of guy that Usan liked. Black bob-style hair, very mature appearance, dressed simply but elegantly. She compared herself and realized she was completely different. She is Nina, with long dyed brown hair and stylish clothes, still just a high school student. Nina frowned deeply. He hugged his pillow tightly and thought desperately that perhaps his preferences had changed a long time ago. She remembered what he said, that a lot of things happened when he and that girl broke up, and it was really difficult. But then, she also remembered that he said he was the one who was abandoned, which caused him to quit his job. Nina stopped complaining and thought that meant he used to love that person very much. She wondered with teary eyes if he still loved that person. She silently asked if he was thinking about getting back together with her. She buried her head in the pillow, sobbing, wondering why that woman had to appear right now. At the family restaurant, Naki asked if the girl was his girlfriend and commented that she looked quite young. He was evasive and did not answer directly. He asked her back why she came here today. She smiled and asked, "Aren't you going to answer my question?" She said that the age difference is not a problem if both of them are okay with it. However, she advises him not to take this too seriously, and emphasized that at his age, his peers are still just kids. She went on to say that older men can be very attractive, but asked what would happen if that changed. Miyaki interrupted her with a serious tone, affirming that he knew all that. But Naki just looked at him more disdainfully. He further explained that due to certain circumstances, the girl is under his care right now. Naki smiled and asked unexpectedly, "So why don't we try again?" She suggested that he and she should get back together, smiled smugly. Miyaki was surprised as if he had just been struck by lightning. He remembered that night, when she called his name, looking slightly annoyed and asked if he was listening. He smiled and replied that he was listening, and said that she had heard from her father. She replied that he had been nagging her about getting married for a while. She tells Aoba that she told her father that she had a boyfriend who was on the road to success, and he asked when he would come out. Aoba asks if she really said that about him. She insisted that it was okay because it was true, but also said that Aoba doesn't like this. She asked why he didn't come and introduce himself to her parents, because at her age she should really think about getting married. She also said that Aoba is young, so she doesn't mind that. He replied affectionately that if she wanted it, he would. She smiled and replied that of course she wanted to. I really love Naki-chan's smile, and he actually visited her parents because he wanted to do everything for her. He tries his best at work, but then one day, Naki asked him how long he would live in this apartment. He replied that living here is not bad, the rent is cheaper so he can save more. He said he would move within a year or so, when they had the means. She nonchalantly agreed, then asked if he planned to stay at the company forever. She said that there are some people who quit their jobs and start their own businesses, and asked if he ever thought about that. He replied that he hadn't thought about it, and said that he was satisfied with his current job. She said that's what Aoba usually does. Later, when he worked late, he realized he hadn't had much time to spend with Naki-chan lately. He wondered if she wouldn't go to work today. In the chat, he texted her, saying he heard she was off and asking if anything happened. She replied that this morning she had a slight fever. He worriedly asked if she was okay and if he should stop by when he got off work. She wrote that it was okay, the fever had gone down. She told him he was tired and didn't need to come visit. He wondered in his heart if that was really okay. Naki-chan's refrigerator is always full of alcohol, and he thought he should at least bring her some food. When he rang her doorbell, it wasn't Naki but another man who opened the door, looking as surprised as him. A cold feeling enveloped Miyaki when he saw Naki sitting calmly on the bed, her clothes barely covering her body. Later, at the coffee shop, she asked him if he was serious, and said he couldn't keep going like that forever. She says that Aoba may find this okay, but she doesn't, and she wants to break up. She asks if he doesn't see anything wrong with him being cheated on. She wondered why he did that, and asked if he was saying he still loved her. In the present moment, he sat silently in front of her, his back hunched, as she asked for another chance at their relationship. He hesitated, then told her he couldn't. He said he couldn't start over with Naki-chan, and that there was nothing more he could do for her. Besides, he was currently only working a part-time job, and he didn't think he could meet her expectations. Naki scrolled through her phone and smiled, saying she was sure Aoba would quickly find a new job. She said that she knew someone who was looking for a systems engineer and told him about Aoba, who really wanted him to meet. Aoba apologized again, causing Naki to stop for a moment, surprised. Then she said she had only one request. She explained that her parents were unhappy when they found out they had broken up, especially after he had met and everything seemed to be going well. She said her parents thought they would get married, but then he broke up with her. So she asked him to meet her parents again and explain everything. Aoba tried to argue, asking why he had to do that, but Naki clapped her hands to interrupt him, and said that she knew he would say that. Thank him in advance. She stood up and said she would contact him about the date. When Aoba tried to tell her to wait a moment, she placed a bill on the table. Promised to see you again soon and left. Aoba stared at the empty chair in front of him, then bowed his head, cradling his head in his hands. He mumbled that he was tired, and wonder what I'm doing. He knew that he shouldn't have had to talk to Naki, and he could have given her a good reason to leave. If I did that, I wouldn't make Nina-san look at me like that. He looked back at where he sat and thought. While talking with Naki-chan, his mind kept thinking about Nina. He thought back and thought it was understandable to think about Nina. At home, Nina is hugging her body pillow tightly, and jumped up when he heard the doorbell ring. She went to open the door and saw him enter, and he's sorry for being late. The expression of relief on her face was indescribable as she welcomed him home. She said she thought he would want some more cake, then walked in front of him and told her that she hadn't eaten yet, so why don't they eat cake together? He replied that he would eat with her, but his eyes secretly glanced at Nina's poster. She clutched the key with both hands and asked if this was a copy. She turned to ask him if she could keep it. He replied that she could, and added that he knew not having the key would inconvenience her. He also said that he intended to give it to her yesterday, but didn't have time. She finished the sentence for him, saying that she fell asleep first. She said she only remembered eating cake. He was about to say something about it, but she asked if she was going to say anything. He quickly replied that it was nothing special. He thought she didn't remember her confession. He remembered her face when she confessed her feelings to him. Nina hesitantly started talking about the woman from before, and he replied that it was someone he used to date. And that was all. He insisted that there was nothing left between them anymore. Then he stopped talking again and said it was nothing, then stood up and said he was going to wash the dishes. She silently watched him leave, then plopped down on her hug pillow. Red face, he stood in front of the sink. He wondered what was happening to him. At school, a boy told Nina that he had been interested in her for a long time. Another said the whole class was about to graduate. And now it's time to make memories together. Another boy shyly said that he would be happy if he could hang out and get to know each other better. Nina, bewildered, asked if this was a punishment game going on. The boy looked shocked, but she continued saying that this was the third time today she had heard the same thing. The boy blushed and admitted that while it was true that he had been eyeing her for a while, but she is always with her boyfriend in class. Nina thought of May, while the boy in front of her explained, "That's why it's hard for him to approach her." May texted her that he wouldn't be coming today because he had to meet a classmate and wouldn't be able to go home with her for a while. Nina realized that she hadn't been around May much lately. The guy in front of him waved awkwardly, saying that he didn't mean to confess or anything, just hoping they could start being friends. Nina smiled and replied that if it was just being friends, there would be no problem. The boy smiled and asked her if she knew about the upcoming fireworks display. She looked at him curiously, and he thought to himself that he seemed to have succeeded. He said that the fireworks display will take place on the first Sunday of summer vacation. Nina exclaimed that it was next week and smiled brightly. Felt like the fireworks show was coming sooner than she thought. He suggested they exchange contact information, but Nina thanked her and left, leaving him confused as he looked at the empty space in front of him. At home, Miyaki is talking on the phone with Naki. He said he didn't like this. "And you never said you were going." He asks if this is really the last time, then agrees if it is. He asked about the time and learned that the appointment would be next Sunday. Nina happily went home, shouting that she was home, and excitedly suggested that they should go see the fireworks together. Miyaki replied that he would go with her, but asked when the fireworks display would take place. Nina replied that it was next Sunday, causing him to pause for a moment and think, next Sunday, what a coincidence. Nina saw him silent, immediately asked if he had other plans. But Miyaki replied that it was okay. He would change the plan, because it's not rushed. Nina bluntly asked if that date was with the woman he met the day before. Miyaki didn't answer, and she bowed her head and said it was okay. She said he had promised her before, and she was sure there would be many more fireworks displays they could go to together. She said it wasn't his fault. Suddenly, he hugged her shoulders and shouted that she was wrong. Miyaki said that he didn't think he would see that woman again, but promised that this would be the last time. He emphasized that the date wasn't that important, and he really wanted to go see the fireworks with Nina. Then he let go of her shoulder and apologized. But Nina took his hand, clasping their fingers together. He looked at his hands and blushed. She asked if he had to go on business that day. He confirmed that that was the plan. Nina replied that they would meet at the fireworks display after he finished work, and she will wait for you. She went on to say that on the day of the fireworks display, she would tell him something, then rested her head on his chest, asking him to answer her seriously. Meanwhile, Yaotome is with friends. One of them suggested that they should go see the fireworks show next week. Another person lamented whether it was just the boys. Another guy suggested inviting a girl. Then they turned to ask Yaotome, "Do you have any plans that day?" Eyes still glued to the phone, he replied that he would go because he was free. The group started discussing which girl to invite. One person joked that if Yaotome participated, there might be no need to invite anyone else. But in his heart, Yaotome thought that he would rather go with someone he really liked. During the meeting with Naki's parents, her father mentioned that there would be a fireworks show in this area tonight. Naki's father suggested that they go see fireworks together after this meeting. But Miyaki apologized, saying he had other plans. Her mother replied that it was a pity, and her father said that it had been a long time since they were able to meet like this. He continued, saying that he was surprised when his daughter told him that he suddenly broke up with her. "I'm sorry for that," and admitted that he didn't even inform both of them in advance. Naki's mother smiled and said it was okay. In addition, she felt happy to see that the two had made up. He looked at her with suspicious eyes, but she didn't seem to notice. She continued to ask that there must have been many misunderstandings before, right? She expressed her joy at having the opportunity to resolve those misunderstandings. She said their daughter was old enough to start worrying about getting married, and she felt very relieved when she heard that the two of them were getting married. He looked at Naki, but she deliberately avoided his eyes.